So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn session. We're going to get started here in about 2 minutes. Okay, everyone, it is now 2 after 12, so we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome. Thanks again for joining us today. Today's topic is going to be interlocks. We're probably going to do a shorter session today, unless we have questions. Of course, always encourage you to ask questions. More than happy to stay for the full hour. We'll make sure everybody gets all their questions answered. Kind of the same format as usual. Have any questions during the presentation, feel free to submit those in the chat. After the presentation is done, we'll open up the audio, so if you'd like to ask those questions verbally as well, feel free to do so. So with that being said, this is Rob Foster. I am the ACM sales engineer for the Central Region, and so I'm going to dive into interlocks now. Okay, so objectives for today, we're going to define what interlocks are, and specifically we're going to focus on the definition of interlocks within ACM. I'm going to talk about the requirements to actually configure interlocks within ACM. Then I'm going to go into a demo. In that demo, we're going to talk about how to set up a interlock or man trap type scenario. And then finally, we'll close out with some questions and answers. So interlocks, this is the definition of interlocks. If you were to go to the ACM help file and type in interlocks, this is what would come back. It would tell you that an interlock is a mechanism that enables a specific event from one element of the system to trigger an action at another element. Now I want to put a little bit more, add a little bit more to that definition. You know, when I read that, it leads me to believe that you know, if something happens on this panel, I could trigger something that happens, you know, to happen on this panel over here. Kind of like what global actions can do. With interlocks, you are limited to the devices that are connected to that panel. So your trigger has to be, you know, within, you know, on that panel or one of the sub panels below it, as well as the action that you want to take. So if you want to press an input button and you want that to activate an output, all that has to be under the same panel. Another part of the definition that you'll see in the help file is that interlocks allow you to set up security routines like man traps, prison entry points, and automated building functions. Sally ports would also be another example where you could use interlocks to do that. So talking about where interlocks are configured in the software, probably the place they are most noticeable is when you're inside the door configuration. But you also have options to configure interlocks from the sub-panel inputs as well as outputs. So a couple configuration examples where you probably use interlocks the majority of the time. This of course, is not the only way to use interlocks, but just probably the most common use case scenarios. One is a door release button. Go to the input point. You can use the interlock to quickly set up that functionality to when you press a button, it does a door grant. And then, of course, your man trap scenarios, and I've listed three different types of scenarios, and really that's not an exhaustive list. There's other ways that you can do a man trap. In today's demo portion, I'm going to talk about setting up a man trap for card in, card out. And then I'm also going to show you where you could do that, where the door is card in, but you have an egress button to get out. And then, of course, there's also the interlock scenario where you don't have a reader at all. You might see that in hospitals or, or maybe lab environments where you're already inside the secure area, but they need you to go through some type of interlock. And maybe there's like a hand wave device or a device that you touch, to get through the door versus, having a card reader. Interlock can be used to configure all those scenarios. So interlock requirements, I'm going to say any newer version of ACM is going to support interlocks. You're going to need to use Mercury controllers and subcontrollers. So the interlock function is not supported on the HID controller line. And just a reminder, field devices have to be that you're going to control or receive input from all need to be connected to the same panel. So just a quick tip, when you are configuring a man trap, make sure that you set up your readers as paired master and slave. And I'm going to show you that in the demo here shortly. Okay, so we're at the demo portion. Told you all this is going to be a shorter presentation today. So as we transition over into the demo, this is kind of the scenario that I'm going to set up. So we'll have an interlock. Reader 1 and Reader 2 will control the same door. I have it labeled in my system as Reader 1, and Reader 2 is a slave to Reader 1 door. And then we have a similar situation over here on the other door involved in the interlock. Reader 3 is going to be the master, and Reader 4, I'm sorry, I've got that mislabeled there. Reader 4 will be the slave. Okay, so before we go to questions and answers, I'm going to pull up the demo portion here quickly. Okay, so we're going to get logged in here. I'm going to show you the door configuration, and then I'm going to jump into the actual interlock configuration. So you see here, I've got readers 1 through 4. I'm going to open up Reader 1. You'll see that my access type is paired master, and it's linked to Reader 2. So one of the other things that I want to show you while we're here is you're going to see that I have a reader configured, I have a door position switch, and I have a strike configured. Now, normally, we would not have a REX configured. The reason I've configured this REX here today is because I'm going to show you that the REX can be used to get out of the interlock as well as the reader. Obviously, in practice, you wouldn't have a REX here because you would want people to scan their card to get out. So just keep that in mind. And go back here. I want to show you Reader 2 because this is the paired slave. Now, what you'll notice here under hardware is I've only configured a reader. I have not configured a door position switch or a strike because it's going to use the door position switch and strike of the paired master, which is Reader 1 in this case. So you'll see it's set up very similar for Readers 3 and 4. Again, paired master, reader door position strike. In the real world, we would not have a REX here. I've just gone ahead and set that up for this second configuration scenario. And I'll pop over here to reader 4 just so you can see. Paired slave to reader 3. Let's go over here to hardware. All we have to configure here is the reader. Okay, so let's jump into interlocks. That's today's topic. What we want to do here with the interlock is we want to make sure when we open up reader 1, the door associated with reader 1, we need to make sure that reader 3, the door associated with reader 3, is closed. If for some reason that door is open, we do not want people to be able to go through reader 1 or reader 2. So let me pull back up my example here. So if you want to scan into reader 1, we need to make sure this door is closed. And also if you want to go out reader 2, so if you're already in the interlock and somebody opens up this door, you don't want them to be able to open this. And of course, vice versa, if this door is open reader 1, we don't want people to be able to come into the airlock from reader 3 or exit from reader 4. Again, sorry, that is mislabeled. So we want to make sure the opposite door is closed. All right, so let's go back. Let's take a look at that configuration. So let's start with reader 1. Now, before I jump into this with the configuration, I just kind of want to tell you what's going on in the back end. So you can kind of think of interlocks as a wizard for macros and triggers. So what it's doing when you configure an interlock, it's creating macros and triggers in the background. And I'll show you that here in a minute. You'll see where the macros and triggers are actually configured under the panel after the interlocks are complete. So what we need to do, since we're starting at reader 1, we want to make sure that if this door is open, if it's either opened or it's held open or forced, we want to make sure that neither reader 3 nor reader 4 will work. So that's going to require 6 total macros. Now, with interlocks, you're going to configure the interlock from the trigger source. So what I mean by that is here, to be able to determine if reader 1 is open, we need to look at the door position switch. So I've gone under the door configuration because that's where the door position switch is configured. So this is where I'm going to start with my interlocks. So let's take a look at the first one here. So it says here that reader 3 disables if reader 1 is either held open or in forced status. So you can see here, I want to make sure this is enabled. I'm going to schedule this to run 24/7. Obviously, if you didn't want that, you could use the schedule here. Your source type is going to be door position switch. You need to make sure you identify specifically it's reader 1, but as you notice here, when you click the drop down, there's really no other option to pick because we only have one door position switch configured for reader 1. Now, our event type is going to be door position change of state. We're going to look for it to go into alarm status. And specifically, we want this trigger to fire if the door goes into forced or held open status. Now, what we're looking at is we want to interlock this function that we're going to talk about here shortly with a specific door. So you can see you've got options. If it wasn't, you could also interlock this function with an output or an input. You can't trigger an input, but you could mask or unmask an input, things like that. But in our scenario, we're going to talk about the door. So when I select the door, I'll get an option to pick specifically which door. Unfortunately, we can't pick 2 here. So that's why it's necessary for us to do 6 interlocks versus just 3, because we can only pick 1 door here. And so once I pick that door, I get this command that will pop up. And then I will select door mode control. And my function is I want to disable the door. So so in this case, if reader 1 is open, that door is open, then we're going to disable reader 3. So of course I'll save that. And you'll see that I've done the same thing for reader 4. So reader 4 is on the other side of reader 3. So we want to make sure we disable that reader as well. Okay, so you'll see here that we have the exact same configuration. The only thing that's different is here when we configure the interlock type, or target rather, we're selecting reader 4. Now let's go back. We've got a couple other things that we need to do. And again, these first 3 interlocks are the same as, basically we're repeating the 4th, 5th, and 6th. It's the same functions that we're doing in 1, 2, and 3. We're just doing it on a different reader. So let's look at the second interlock. Now in this case, reader 3 disables if reader 1 is open. Now the reason we need to do that is because obviously the door held and door forced, those are alarm conditions. So we're going to trigger, somebody, either one of those events happens, we're going to trigger the other door or the other reader not to work. But we also need to cover that instance where somebody uses their card and opens the door. That's not an alarm. The door just opened. So we need to make sure that we still disable the other reader even if the door opened and there's no alarm. So that's what I've done here. Same things, enabled. We need to make sure we select a schedule. Our source type, again, will be door position switch. And we have no other choice but the door position switch that's associated with this door. And in this case, our event, it's not going to be an alarm. Our door status is actually going to be secure. And so under that, we're basically going to trigger on door just opened, no alarm. So now we'll go down to interlocks. We want to interlock this with reader 3. And then our specific command is door mode control, and our function will be disabled. So that covers our open scenario. Now, one thing I do want to point out, it's very important under the door configuration. Let me go back here. Make sure that you have detailed events checked under the door configuration, or these interlocks are not going to work properly because you're not going to get those triggers for, when the door is open, things like that. So make sure that you have detailed events checked under your door configuration. So let's go back to interlocks. Let's take a look at the third example. And so what we need to do is we need a way to re-enable the door once it's secure. So that's what we've done here. So reader 3 enables reader 1, once reader 1 is closed. So we've enabled it, schedule, applied, door position switch. Our door status is secure, and we're going to trigger on when the door closes. So that's going to take care if the door closes after a door held event or door forced event, or if the door closes after somebody presented a card and opened the door and went through. So either way, that's going to cover us. So we want to interlock with reader 3. And specifically, we're going to, our command will be door mode control, and we're going to put the door back into card only. So, as I mentioned, these are our first, our first 3 interlocks here take care of reader 3, but we need to repeat the same thing, the same 3 interlocks to do the same actions on reader 4. So if you look at these, they're the same as, the ones we configured in the beginning. It's just the target is different. In this case, it'd be reader 4. So now that takes care of half of the configuration. So now if somebody goes or opens up reader 1, then reader 3 and reader 4 are not going to work. So now let's look at the other half, because we have to do the same thing on reader 3. So let's take a look there. So I'm going to go over to Interlocks. Very similar programming. It's just our target's going to be a little bit different. And of course, our source is going to be different this time because we're looking at reader 3. So I'll open this up. You know, our door position switch, that's going to be our trigger, but our source now is reader 3. And remember, you have to go to reader 3. You have to go to that door to configure this interlock. Okay, so same thing, reader 3, door position change of state, goes into alarm, and triggering specifically on forced and held open alarms. Interlocks with door target is reader 1, door mode control disabled. So I'll just run through this real quickly so you can see it. It's the same programming. We're just changing, you know, the source is different. We're configuring this under door 3 instead of door 1, and our targets will be different. And same thing, we need to re-enable the door when the door is closed. So here we go. Source is going to be R3. This time we're looking at door status secure, and our door mode will be door mode control, and we will switch the door mode back to card only when the door is closed. Okay, so that is the programming. So let's walk through it. Let's make sure it works right. Of course, anytime you configure anything, you want to make sure you leave time for testing. So let's just walk through it. Let's make sure it works right. Let me pull up here. So here's the video. Sorry if the camera angle's a little bit off. So I'll present my card. You'll see that the strike relay or output fired. So do that again. I'll open up the door. Now I'll go over here to reader 3. My door is secure, so I should be able to get in. Okay, so we know that it works going into the man trap. Let's go through the reverse. So we've gone in all the way through the man trap. Now let's go out. Present my card, a relay fired, and then we'll go out again. Open up my door position switch. So my man trap works as far as being able to card in and get through the man trap as long as the door is secure. So now let's take this scenario where I'm going to go to reader 3 and I'm going to open up the door contacts. So I've just simulated a door forced event. So the door is currently opened here, so this door should not be able to open. As you see, I got denied. The relay is not firing. On reader 1, let's check in reader 2 because there could be somebody already inside the man trap. And again, you can see I'm getting denied. I'm not able to get through the door. Now, once somebody does the right thing and closes the door, so now the door has closed, and that was from an alarm condition. So now I should be able to get out of the man trap. Relay fired, I'm able to get out. And if somebody wanted to come in, same thing, strike fired, and we can get in. So we know it works. The door is forced open. Now we need to test, you know, somebody presents their card, opens the door, and just forgets to close it. You know, is it still going to disable the other door? So let's check and make sure. So I'm going to present a card, open up the door. I'm going to leave that held open. And I apologize. I believe my held open time is about 15 seconds. So we're going to have to wait for that to go into held open. So let's pull up ACM here. So you can see we've gotten our pre-alarm on the held open. It should change to held open here shortly. But even if not, you still could not get through the door right now because it is open. So it hadn't gone into alarm yet, but it is still open. So And the door now, you can see, if you look at the event log, you can see where I've tried to access a locked door because the door is in alarm status. So let's go ahead and close that. We'll re-secure the door. Now, one of the things to keep in mind here is I did present my card before it actually went into alarm. So the door was just open. It wasn't in an alarm condition. It was in that pre-held door alarm condition. So now we know it works, whether the door is just open with no alarm or if there is an alarm at the door. So that is the configuration to take care of your interlock. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that we could do the same thing even if we just had a card in and maybe a rec switch of some sort to get out of the door. So you don't necessarily have to have a card reader to get back out of the door. And really, you don't have to have a card reader at all. You could do this all with input points. So on my door, as I showed you all before, I did configure a rec. So typically you would not configure a rec if you have a reader on both sides. But now you'll see, I'm going to activate the rec button and you'll see the same kind of function. You won't be able, the door will not unlock when you hit the rec if the other door is open. So let's simulate that real quick. So in this case, M1 is going to be my recs for reader 1, reader 2 door. M2 is my recs for reader 3 and reader 4. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the door contact on reader 3, reader 4. And now if I hit the recs button, you'll see that the strike did not fire. So this would probably be a scenario where you have a mag lock on a door because you don't want the door to open, you know, if the opposite door is open. So here, again, I'm hitting the recs button, it's not letting me out. So let's go ahead and secure that door contact. So now that this door is closed, so let's open up this door. I hit the recs and I'm able to get out the door. Now we'll go ahead and do the same thing with reader 1. We're going to open up the door contacts for reader 1. That door is no longer secure. Our recs should not work now. So let's hit that. And we are not getting a strike output. So that's what we want. So now let's go back and secure reader 1. So now this door is secure. We should be able to use our recs to get out. And the strike did fire. So interlocks will help you through both of these scenarios, or really all three of the scenarios that we talked about. Now I just want to show you quickly what's happening on the back end here. So we did all of this configuration under interlocks. You can see that it created 6 interlocks. Actually, we created 12 total. So let's go look at the macros and triggers that it created under the panel. So I went to my panel. I'm going to go over here to macros. And wow, look at that. There are all these macros that were configured for me. And the same thing with triggers. All these triggers are configured by using that interlock function. Now you'll notice if you open these up, you can't really modify them from here. If you needed to make changes to your interlock configuration, you need to go back to the interlock section where you configured it. But just know that it is creating the macros and triggers for you on the back end. If you really wanted to, you could configure this through macros and triggers. However, I strongly recommend that you use the interlock function to do it. It will cut down on errors and you know, make it a lot easier for you to configure it. So with that said, we're now at the 12:30 mark. I'm going to open it up to questions. So feel free to submit some questions. Looks like we have some here. Feel free to come off mute if you want to ask those questions as well. Okay, let's see. What additional programming steps would be needed if there was a third door into the interlock space? Um, so basically what you would have to do if you had that third door is that would become another trigger point. So if that third door was unlocked, you would need to, or not unlocked rather, but if that third door was either open or in forced or held status, you would need to disable the other two doors. So it can be done. You can have multiple doors. It's just more programming. So same type of programming, just more of it. Let's see what we'd have here. Also, how would you override this in an emergency? So I'm assuming that question would be like if you have somebody inside the man trap, maybe you have a door contact that's faulty. It's reporting the door is open when in fact it's secure. And obviously you can't trap people inside a burning building, or, if there's some other type of emergency, you can't keep people trapped. You got to let them out. I would say probably in that scenario, of course, you're always going to have to refer to the local authority having jurisdiction. I would think most jurisdictions, if you're preventing somebody from exiting a door in some way, that there probably is going to be code requirements. So always check with the authority having jurisdiction to make sure how they want that emergency override to work. But my guess would be that you would probably use some type of pneumatic button. And assuming you're using maglocks to control those doors, you probably run your positive power through that, the power coming from the power supply directly to the maglock. You'd probably run the leg of the power through that pneumatic button. So if you press that pneumatic button, it breaks power directly to the maglock and lets you out regardless of what's going on with the access control system. That would be my guess on how the AHJ would handle it. But again, always check with the AHJ to make sure that's the way they want you to handle an emergency. Let's see. Could you use the interlock for an ADA door? I think you could. I would have to set it up. I don't know that I've set it up that way before, but I don't see why you couldn't. But I'd be happy. Chuck, feel free to reach out to me if you've got an ADA door situation that you're working on right now, and you want to see if interlocks can be used for that. I'd be happy to look at that scenario with you. Let's see. We also have a question here. Any thought on losing master-slave terminology, moving to parent-child or other? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll certainly pass that along to product management.
Yeah, hey Rob, it's Jared. We were just talking about that yesterday, and thank you for bringing it up, Michael. That is something that we're actually considering, is changing the terminology. We actually use the terminology that's built into the Mercury controllers, which happens to be paired master, paired slave. But we are looking at potentially changing that, obviously for sensitivity reasons.
Great. Do we have any other questions? I don't think I see any more here. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining today. Let's check here with Jared real quick. Jared, what are you doing on Friday?
Friday, originally the invite went out saying we were going to be covering Verdi biometrics. We're actually going to be switching that up, and we're going to be covering ACM and its deployment in VMware, and kind of everything you need to know about how to deploy ACM in VMware, and what VMware is and how it's good for you. So look forward to that. If anyone needs the link for Friday's webinar, please reach out to Rob or myself, and we'll be happy to send that to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jared. And thank you all for joining. Just a quick reminder, Monday, the 25th, there won't be a session due to the Memorial Day holiday. So, everyone enjoy your holiday. Thanks again for joining. Be sure to join us Friday at noon Pacific time. Thanks again.
Thanks, Rob.